So how do you actually use this thing? I know it may seem self-explanatory, but I love it when people tell me exactly how to do something, so that is what I'm going to do for you today. So I've already got the weight added that I want to use, and I am using a lifting pin to do that. Now I have the block in the orientation for the edge size that I want to use. I want to make sure that the edge that I want to use, I'm going to be pulling up against it. I know that may seem self-explanatory, but I think it's great to make everything crystal clear. So I'm going to be using the 20 mil edge, and that means that I'm going to be pulling up against the 20 mil edge. Now, when it comes to actually using this, we want to remember that it is essentially the same as when we are using the hangboard over our head. We want to have good form on our fingers, our wrist, all the things remain the same. We're just kind of doing it in a different way where we have the implement below us. One of the pros, I think, to using this is that you can get a really good picture of what your hand is doing, where it's kind of hard to see that sometimes when your hand is above your head. So let's say that I'm really wanting to work on a nice half crimp position. So I can take a look down and make sure, okay, do I have all of my fingers kind of straight up and down? Do I have my wrist stacked over my knuckles? And I can just get a really good idea of what my form is without having to guess. Make sure you have good form in the grip position that you want to use. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is, before we actually perform our weighted hang, we are going to put some tension on our fingers. So we're not just going from 0 to lifting. We're going to have tension on the fingers before we start. I'm going to get some chalk. It is super helpful to use chalk when you're doing this. I'm going to get in my half crimp position that I want to use. Now, we are not lifting this with our arm. Your arm is not going to do anything. This is not a row of any sorts. Your fingers stay in an isometric position, which means that they aren't moving. You're going to get in your grip position and you keep your fingers in the same position. The thing that is doing the moving is essentially your knees and hips. Okay, so I'm going to get in the position that I want to use, and I'm going to be slightly hinged over. You can notice that I have my hand in the middle of my body and my feet are straddling the weight. We don't want to be way back here. The angle of pull isn't directly up, and we want the angle of pull to be directly up. Okay, so I'm going to bend my knees. I'm hinging my hips back slightly. I'm going to keep my arm really nice and straight. It doesn't have to be locked out. Okay, slight bend in the elbow. We're working on our muscles, not our joints. Then all I'm going to do is straighten my knees. So nothing happens actually at my arm. I'm not pulling with my elbow, and I'm also not curling up with my fingers. My fingers stay in the same position. I bend my knees, and then I straighten my knees and my hips. And that is where the weighted hang comes in. Things that we would want to avoid when we're doing this type of finger training, number one, is having the implement way out in front of us and then trying to pull up from there. That's just going to put more stress and load on the low back, and it's just really not necessary. The other thing that we want to avoid is curling up with the finger. So I went over that a little bit before, but I do just want to reiterate that this is not like a curl up with your fingers, okay? Your fingers are going to stay in whatever grip position you use. So if I'm choosing to do more of an open hand position, they're just going to stay in that open hand position. I'm going to bend and then I straighten with my lower body. That's how the weight comes up off the ground. The other thing that you want to avoid is having a sling that is too long, okay? You want to make sure that whatever you're using, you need to have it be taut when your knees are bent. If there's a bunch of slack in this when my knees are bent and then I go to straighten my legs and it still hasn't taken the slack out of the system, then I'm gonna have to end up pulling with my arm. So make sure that this is at the appropriate height so it makes how you're using it effective, okay? So again, you don't want a bunch of slack in here. When you have your knees bent like such, you already want there to be some tension here so that when you straighten your legs, when your arm comes along, then the weight will come up off the floor. So make sure that this is the right length to make that happen.